How much do you know about the field of intellectual property and trademarking? It's a field that we don't often get to explore and one so important to the women business owners of today. So I asked renowned intellectual property expert Neidy Hornsby of Noir IP to join us and share how she supports women in business to bring their dreams to life while protecting their brand. Neidy and her team assisted me on the journey of trademarking Mystical Sisterhood with ease and grace. She is committed to providing affordable brand protection solutions for women entrepreneurs. We talk about what intellectual property is, why trademark in the first place, and how women can support one another. I can't wait to see you in the episode. Welcome to Mystical Sisterhood, Neidy. You are the founder of Noir IP, an intellectual property firm for female founders. And like I
Mhm.
said in the intro, providing affordable brand protection solutions for women entrepreneurs. And I'll just say a really hearty and huge yes to that.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to connect with you a couple of years ago when I first became curious about trademarking Mystical
Mhm.
Sisterhood. It was something along my way that I just was drawn to immediately. I always say, like, the formation of this business for me has been an intuitive process. So, following when the name came to me, doing a podcast, and then trademarking, which we started, I think, a couple of years ago, like I said. So, you were going to get into a lot of things for the listener today, including my journey, your journey. First, just want to say welcome and thank you for being with us.
Listen, thank you so much for creating this space, for creating this time for us to talk about what could be really boring if we're honest, but we're going to make it fun. So just thank you for creating the community and the space for us to talk about really important things.
I like to pull in the business and legal aspects where I can too, because a lot of the listeners here are starting something new in their lives or
Mhm.
considering it. So I think it's,
Sure.
and a lot is blooming and flourishing out there. So I think the whole conversation around establishing your brand, protecting your brand is apropos for these times.
Absolutely. And what I like to say all the time is that what we want to do, especially when we're considering starting our businesses, is to put strategy over excitement. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's really difficult, right? Because when we get these amazing ideas and we start to form that vision, we just want to go, right? And I applaud that spirit. But I think that we can go with reason and with strategy. And what I hope No RIP does is to help women who are building these amazing things
Yeah.
just build them on solid ground, right?
Mm.
So, again, very appropriate, very timely conversation.
Yeah, and we don't know what we don't know. And so
Exactly.
I think that's just a huge piece of life is
Hmm.
when we wish for something in our lives and we don't know, pull in the support that's really going to help you get to where you want to go. And that's, I feel like in a way, it's one of the foundational tenets of Mystical Sisterhood. And my finding of those resources that can support people. And then this conversation is perfect for that. Let me ask you first, before we get into any sort of processes and strategies, how did you get into this field? Was it always something you knew you wanted to do?
So I knew that being an attorney was the way to go. I think I've shared with you before how it was included in my child play, right? I sued Barbie, I sued and defended her and all the things, right? So I knew that being an attorney was just always going to be the path. I did not expect to fall into IP. I literally fell into IP as I was did the whole law firm thing, did the whole linear path to success, quote unquote, as an attorney, realized that the type of wife and mom that I wanted to be, that value system just was not going to thrive in
Okay.
corporate America, right? So decided to bet on myself and practice door law. And door law is anyone that comes through the door able to pay. I was their attorney, right? So did a bunch of a lot. And then my husband, who was also an entrepreneur, was like, "Hey, I think the business needs a trademark. Can you help me with that?" And I did. And I'm like, this is really cool, and kind of fell in love with IP, and then one female client led to another female
Wow.
client, and here we are almost 10 years later, exclusively serving female founders and being quite unapologetic about
It's good. I love it so
it.
much. And it's like you read my mind because when I was thinking about questions today and whether that path was linear, and it sounds like it was until it wasn't. And
Until it wasn't.
it needed to take those different formations and for
Hmm.
you to kind of get more clear and into an alignment of how you wanted to serve and support.
And I actually don't think that that's really a unique story of
Mm-mm.
mine, right? I think that when I've talked to so many female founders where that's just a common theme, right? We Once we take that first leap, it's like our intuition kicks in, and then the other step shows up, and the next thing you know, we built this thing that was once in our imagination.
Mm.
Right. So I think that that first step is the trickiest, right? Because, self-doubt is a very
Absolutely.
real thing.
Yes.
And just the fear of failure is a very real thing.
Yep.
But one step at a time seems to get us there. And I've just heard too many stories that have that same origin, right? Where it's like I decided to bet on myself and somehow I'm still here.
Right. Yeah, and we just don't know what is around the corner and what's
Right.
going to unfold. I find that as I step in, I'm glad you named the self-doubt and the fear because I feel for myself that I'm at a turning point of moving through those things and developing more
Mm-hmm.
confidence to stand and say, no, this is what I do and this is how I do it.
Right.
I love that you mentioned values because I think a lot of the businesses these days are so based on our value systems. And that's to me, right now I'm putting together a resource guide and it's like I want to pull in every resource that
Mm-hmm.
has been brought forth, but I know collaboration is one of my like top values. Could I name that when I started this a few years back? Not really. Like
Right.
it's becoming more into fruition all the time, but that confidence piece is a turning point for like you're naming like most of us in business. It's like you got to begin, you got to see where your
You
blind
gotta
spots
begin.
are and mhm. Yeah.
So, I because I'm a mom of three, I think that the entrepreneurship journey mirrors parenting in many ways, at least for me. It's the minute you think you've mastered this one aspect of parenting, here comes
Yeah.
this new doozy, right? And
Absolutely.
you are forced to meet the moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes your character has to rise to that occasion too, right? So
Yes.
when I think about who I was 2015 when I finally decided to just bet on Neidy, I don't even recognize that girl. And I will bet that in another 10 years I won't recognize Neidy of
Mm.
2024. I think
Mhm.
it's a beautiful evolution, right? And
Yeah.
and let's be very clear
Yeah.
about that too. But to your point, when you look back on even your goals change, right? Because it's a new season, is a new moment. But I think that in the leaning in and in the walking forward, that those
Mhm.
breakthroughs happen.
Oh, and I think so many women these days too are not only on the path of whether you call it solopreneur or
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship, but they're doing the personal growth work to the side or incorporated within. And that makes the journey, like you said, yeah, sure, there's a lot of density to move through, there are
Mm-hmm.
blockages that we may have, but it's a beautiful pairing too, where it's not just like we're not one person over here in our business and a different one. You're telling me now, like, my children as teachers are I bring into my business as a teacher.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. And the boundaries that you create for your children, you create with your job, right? With what you are building. One of the really emotionally expensive lessons that I learned just last year is that you are the business, right?
Right.
So when you are down, when you are dealing with whatever the case may be, trauma, just being physically ill, whatever that thing is on the personal side, it absolutely shows up on the business side. At least for me, my experience has not been that there is like CEO Neidy and then personal life Neidy. It's Neidy, right? So it bleeds in back and forth. So I don't take that reality lightly. I think that that is very that can be very challenging.
Mhm.
But, in line with your brand and what you're building, it is the power of the collective. It is the power of the sisterhood, right?
Yeah.
It is women like you creating spaces for us to say, hey, I kind of hate being a CEO. Am I going to stop? No, but I kind of hate it today, right? Like everyone wants to be a boss until payroll. Like I want to quit the first week of every month, but somehow I'm here.
Mhm.
So it is in these moments that you get out of your head and you realize that the journey is this almost identical for everyone that's trying to build the thing, independent of industry, independent of what the goal is. There are just some common themes, and it is important to have these moments of connection.
Ah, so beautiful. And so much wisdom coming through you across a range of topics. So I'm kind of like, oh, this is so good. And that's the first time I've ever heard emotionally expensive. And it's so good.
Listen, I don't know where that came from because, but it's the best way to describe just seeing how one part of your life can really show up on this other side.
Absolutely. It's so beautiful. So here you are now. You've got Noir IP. How many years has the firm been in existence?
I left corporate America in 2015. There's been different versions of the firm, as I said, but Noir IP, focusing exclusively on female founders, has been a while around for quite a bit of years. I
Yeah.
want to say maybe 2018. So the whole serving female founders has just been a consistent theme from the beginning. So when folks are like, is that a really good business strategy to like leave half of the population on the table? I'm like, yes, because
Mhm.
the half that I'm serving has built this firm with me, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
no regrets about what the firm looks like now. Again, another part of the entrepreneurship journey that I think is universal. You set out to build this one thing, and as you're building, you may end up with something that looks a little bit different than what you thought, but that you love just as much, if not more.
When I'm thinking about my own process and when I first contacted you, I think I knew it was an intuitive feeling, and I don't know what it nets out to in the end. Of course, I don't, but is that I knew Mystical Sisterhood would be something big, and that was
Mm-hmm.
unequivocal to me. And I think it's one thing to go and say, like, oh, I'm going to go grab a domain name, but it's yet a whole nother one to say, what about trademarking? And I love, like, when I first got in touch with your firm, is that it's not like it's this huge commitment to begin
Mm-hmm.
down the path of exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Can you first say, why would we trademark? Why would we
Sure.
create intellectual property?
I think that the easiest way to think about intellectual property as a whole, and mind you, there are several different buckets within that concept. I think is to say is to know that it's literal property, right? It just happens to be intangible. So the same things that you can do with your house, meaning you can sell your house, you can rent your house, equivalent to what you can do with your IP, right? You can sell your trademark if you sell the business, or you can license your trademark to someone else. So what we're talking about is protecting an actual asset. Unfortunately, because we are so trained to think of property as something that you can touch and feel, we don't give our ideas that type of value, when in reality it is our ideas that we monetize and leverage, right? So IP law has these vehicles for us to create legal fences around the things that we are building. From a trademark perspective, what we're talking about is protecting your brand identity, right? Whenever you are recording this podcast, whenever you are hosting a workshop, whenever you are at a networking event, this is not a hobby for you, right? You
Right.
are building something with legacy in mind. And if you're building something with legacy in mind, that you want to take advantage of the fact that the law created these vehicles for you to protect this thing that you're
Yeah.
building, right? So now you're
Right.
saying, hey, Mystical Sisterhood as a brand name, as a source identifier, right, is protected in this space. And we're talking about infringement, right? We're talking about outside of how you can monetize owning your trademark, we're really talking about being able to protect what you're building against other people trying to leverage that brand equity that you are creating.
Yeah. It seems like such a beautiful foundational piece that
Yes.
also when it's created, it I don't know what quality it adds to it. It's not realness, that's the word that first came to me, but I like how you said legacy and how it's literally something that's born forth
It's
from
absolutely
individuals.
born from
Yes,
you.
yes.
And you know, I love that, Maureen. Thank you for even phrasing it that way because it is born from us, right? And that laboring process
Mhm.
is not fun, right? But it's important. And then once you bring this thing into the world, you want to protect it, right? And that's what we are talking about. And I like to use the word legacy when I talk about entrepreneurship because I have yet to meet the woman or the female founder who's like, "Oh, yeah, let me invest all this money in marketing and in legal services for this hobby." I have yet to meet her, right?
Right,
Every
right.
female founder that I talk to is building this thing because she wants to pass it on to someone else, or she wants to sell it in 3 years.
Mm,
She wants to be able to exit and, 10x her investment. So women who I meet with are not meeting with me because this is something that's fun to them. They're
mhm.
meeting with me because they're building something that is real. And if it's real, then let's take all of the strategic, make all of the strategic decisions that we can.
Oh, and I feel like sitting where you do, that it must be pretty cool to see what comes through the door.
I have the best job in the world.
Uh-huh.
I have the best job in the world. I have through consult there was this my favorite consultation of all time was with this female founder who is talking to me about licensing her brand and like this huge complex deal that she was negotiating as she's breastfeeding, right? And she's not missing a beat. She's like, and then I think we need to do this and we need to negotiate at this price point. And I'm just like, and but she's breastfeeding while she's having this really like in-depth, complicated legal conversation. And I'm at that point I knew like why would I work with anybody other than a fellow
Absolutely.
female
Yes.
founder, right?
Yeah.
Because we're doing all of the things, right? We're mothering our children, we're building these 6 7 figure empires, we're in heels with a smile drinking our water, like all the things, all the things. So I have the best job in the world,
Mm.
hands down.
It feels like your job allows you to give and receive, and they often say it's
In
just like
equal
bring
measure.
an equal
in
measure,
in
just like
equal
the
measure.
shoreline comes in and out, our breath comes in and out. It's like you give, you get to receive. And
Hmm.
sure, when you walk out that door at the end of the day, that it's just so fulfilling. I sense that.
It is fulfilling because I am my typical client,
Hmm.
meaning I am building my vision as well. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to build this thing that supports my values, meaning my job, for lack of a better word, has to support the type of wife and the type of mom that I want to be, and not
Hmm.
the other way around. I don't want to sacrifice this area of my life for my income, which that was why I felt so out of alignment in corporate America, right? Because
Hmm.
there was no way to have both. Well, you know what? There was no way for me to have
For you.
both, right?
Yeah.
I had to go out and build the thing. So the women that I talk to every day are building the thing for whatever their reasons may be. Their reasons may not be similar to mine, but what they do know is that in order to live according to their value structure, they're going to have to bet on themselves.
Yeah. And I love that because you're an example of a person, because I've known attorneys in my area, women who have given up their career because maybe it's not in alignment, but also because the traditional structure didn't allow them to
Right.
do all the things they wanted to do. But it's a little bit of thinking outside the box, like, I worked hard for this. Is there a way that I can tweak it and make it mine? And
Mm-hmm.
that's entirely possible too. So I always love having women who are just doing things a little bit differently, or like almost like in through the side door versus just that straight path.
And the
And
courage that that takes.
yes, the
The
courage.
courage that it
Mhm.
takes to go against the grain to say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give up like really good health insurance and the stability of a paycheck every 2 weeks. And I'm just going to go out and hope that someone hires me. My God.
Yeah.
Like,
It's so
my
true.
God, the courage to do that.
Mhm.
I don't take it for granted. And I think that what makes our firm really special is that, again, I'm serving women who are doing exactly what I'm doing, just in their
Mhm.
respective industry.
Yes, it's great energy. Why don't you, we can use me as an example if it makes
Sure.
sense. But in terms of just the trademarking process for anyone who loves that part of the conversation too, is that, when I went to you, I said, hey, here's my idea. And
Hmm.
and then you had said, I remember, and you can say this part of it, but like, okay, Maureen, we're going to take a look. It's almost like this due diligence part of it. Like, we're going to take
Right.
a look and see if it's even in the realm of possibility that
Yes.
this thing has legs to stand on. Can you say
Hmm.
more about that part of the process?
So that part of the process, it's us ensuring, right, that the brand name, the asset, the mark that you are trying to protect, in your case, Mystical Sisterhood, was actually available in that space, meaning we're going to go through what we call a clearance process. We want to pull this comprehensive report to see everything that is out there with Mystical Sisterhood. Was it already filed, for a trademark registration? If so, in what class and what space, so that we can make a strategic decision on how to move forward. So it's not necessarily, does your vision have legs to stand on from the perspective of, like, as a business,
Okay.
but is the name that you're using, in your case, of, using you as an example, what's the strength of that as a mark? Could we actually get this trademark? And it so happened that based on your report, we made the strategic decision to move forward. And I'm glad that we did, because fast forward, we were able to get that registration. I do want to just go back briefly to something you said in the beginning of our conversation. You said that you leaned into your intuition to start the business, and then you leaned into your intuition to even have that discovery call about the trademark. And the reason why I think that's so important is because we get one of two phone calls every now and again, and they're both tragic, right? Phone call number one is, hey, I've been building this thing for years. I just got a cease and desist. That's a bad day, right?
Mhm.
Or question number two, or call number two is, hey, I have been building this thing for years, and there's someone who is clearly infringing on our mark, clearly diluting what we're doing. That's also a tragic conversation. And I think that when we put strategy over excitement, we start
Mhm.
to take those steps, right? To be able to give our future attorney as much legal ammunition as possible to defend us in those types of situations. So kudos to you for not ignoring that bug to have the conversation on trademarking, even if you didn't understand what the process was. One of the things
Yeah.
that we
Hmm.
pride ourselves on is that we want you to understand the process. So at
Yeah.
every juncture, okay, this is what's happening now. This is what's going to happen next, so that you can speak intelligently about, or at the very least,
Yeah.
understand what this investment means and how we're stewards of that.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for the clarifications on a certain things and that part of the process. And then I think once you came back to me and said, "Okay, Maureen, this is looking pretty good and here's what you need
Mm-hmm.
to go forward." And for me, I had a website already,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was almost, speak to this part of it, almost like it's not the discovery phase, right? It's almost like the proof of concept phase in a way.
So once we got your clearance back, and we realized that you were working with a very strong mark, now we start the application process. Now our goal at this juncture is to secure the filing date, right? So that's when we started to draft the application. That's when we started to make the legal arguments of use, all the boring stuff that no one really cares about, but we nerd out on. Essentially, simply put, we started to draft the application for filing. We sent you that application, the draft, to review
Mhm.
and to approve. And then once you did that, it was only a matter of filing and monitoring the application's progress through the USPTO system until we were able to get that registration. So we treat it as our baby that you have given us for the journey of trademarking.
Yeah, and then I believe it was earlier this year that
Mm-hmm.
it came through, and it
Yeah.
was just such an exciting time to celebrate, like, wow. And it wasn't that is a whole birthing journey, that whole process.
That whole process is the whole, because now
Mhm.
you have an asset. right?
Yep.
So
Hmm.
it's not just that you are protecting brand integrity and the brand equity that you are building, but you have a literal asset that you own based on going through that process.
Absolutely. So thank you for being the
For
attorney
playing
to,
a
yeah.
small role in what is already, proving to be a worthwhile endeavor.
Absolutely. I think I had shared with you earlier that I think it was about 4 months ago, I received an email and I had named
Mm-hmm.
one of my podcast titles. It was one of my guests, and I had named it something that it was kind of earlier on in my podcast days. And I'm like, gosh, what am I going to title this? And I come up with this name. And like a year later, I get an email that says, excuse me, you're using this trademark name, this registered trademark. And I had no idea. And at first,
Yeah.
I had to take a step back and I looked up the lawyer to make sure it was legitimate first.
Mm-hmm.
And his website came up, and it was a whole IP firm as well. And I knew that it was such an innocent naming of the title of the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. And so I wrote to the lawyer and just said, "Hey, I will gladly change the name." And he wrote back so just, amicably and said, wonderful, that's great. But it was an interesting experience because I got it, and then they send it to the podcast aggregator and they're like, take that down, so and then it was put back up after I just, changed the name. But that was the first time that I had run into anything like that. And to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
it was actually a good learning experience because it makes me think about how I title things now. And it's not like I'm going to go search and see if something's trademarked
Sure.
necessarily, but just to keep them very general in nature. So,
I think that what you just described is the power of owning your trademark. The fact that he was able to, unfortunately, you were on the other side of this, but the lesson is the lesson nonetheless, meaning
mhm,
you got to see the power of owning your
yeah,
IP in action, right? The same
right.
way that he was able to do that. So will you? Well, we hope that you never have to, but like now you have this golden ticket to be able to have those tough conversations with
Yep.
infringers and stand on the legal high ground, right? Because you've taken this step and you've gone through this journey, and that's why you want to hire a professional to do that. I think we all have our zone of genius. I think I told you the last time we spoke that during the pandemic I cut my own hair, and I
Mhm.
realized that that's not my zone of genius, right?
Yes.
Right. So let the expert do what they're good at. So to avoid these issues, right? But I think that I love that example because while you were on the other side of it, you got to see the power of our owning of our IP.
I love it. It's making me think of the word of the feeling empowered. To go through this
Mm-hmm.
process has allowed me to feel very empowered around my brand. Do you see, since you've been doing it for a while, more and more women stepping forward or establishing businesses? Are there changes you're noticing?
Yeah, yeah. So, oh my gosh, and I had this number and I forget it. So please don't quote me on this, but it's something ridiculous like 1,600 new businesses are launched every day by women. It was a number put out by Forbes, and I'm so upset that I can't think of what the number was, but it's something
Yeah.
outrageous like that.
Yeah.
We are really taking affirmative action with our lives. We are really becoming the captains of our destiny. And that looks like launching businesses. What I love about this movement is that a lot of us are doing so very thoughtfully. And I don't know if it's because, there's just so much education out there available.
Yeah.
You can just Google things to consider when launching a business, and you can get some really good information. And trademark is always top five, if
Yeah.
not top three. So so I think women are leaning into doing these things in a very thoughtful and methodical, strategic way. So yeah, I am really seeing a lot of us just betting on ourselves, but not doing it very haphazardly, doing it very carefully and thoughtfully, and having these important conversations. Also, on the other side of that, I am seeing a lot of us being really assertive about, hey, can you reach out to this person because they're using a mark that's very close
Yeah.
to mine in a similar service, and this might be infringement. And I'm like, whoa, like this email was drafted like a junior associate at a firm, right? Like using all the correct terminology
Yeah.
and being really protective of their vision, and it's a cool place to be and to
Mhm.
see how not only are women believing in themselves enough to launch these businesses, they're just being very intentional and careful about it.
Yeah, yeah, and we're very interconnected, aren't we? It's that
Hmm.
this is growing and we have each other to look to, and as I sit here, I started this in my early 50s, and so it's like, yeah, I mean, you can do this at any point in your life, like, and it's
Absolutely.
we're allowing that sort of creative flow that's our it's just like we're born with, and we're rediscovering, and it is sort of it's almost like a renaissance age in a way that there's so much being created. Yeah.
And I love what you said about us looking to each other. You know, it drives me insane when I hear people, and it's mostly men, that say women don't work well together. That has never been my experience,
Mhm.
especially in this entrepreneurship space. Again, women have built my firm, right? And
Yeah.
I pride myself on being intentional about making connections within the collective, as I like to call it, right? So if I know that you need a website person, I
Yeah.
am going to find the female founder that I think would be perfect for that.
Yeah.
Or you need an accountant, I'm going to find the perfect female founder that's good for that, right? And that happens towards me as well, right? Like, I,
Mhm.
again, not only are women hiring us, but women are our marketing team, right? We have
Mhm.
yet to spend a dollar on marketing and advertising, all
It's
referral based.
amazing.
So it drives me nuts when I hear people say women don't work well together, because I have yet to experience that as
Yeah.
truth.
Mhm. Yeah. I find the same with my experience in building this business. It's also beautiful, Nady. I think that we've encompassed a lot of things today. Is there anything that I'll ask left off the table in terms of your business you'd like to include? Or sometimes there's something that comes to my guest at the end of the episode that you just want to share.
I want to share that, again, one of our pillars as a business is that we want to bridge the gap, not just in access to quality legal service, but also to education. If you don't know, reach out. We have
Mhm.
no issue in answering questions. You can send me an email. My DMs are always open. You can
Yeah.
schedule a consultation, and just bring your questions. There's no expectation that
Mhm.
you, who are building this beautiful business and it happens to be a salon, should also know
Yeah.
the legal parameters and
Yeah.
rules associated with trademark, right? So reach out, because I believe in the power of the collective. Our goal is to also bridge the gap in education and in knowledge. So if you don't know, we may. So we're here. And also, this is about to go in the mail. Like,
Ah. It's
so
beautiful.
it's beautiful. So congratulations to you.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
again, and I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Not for having me on the show. Yes, thank you for that as well. But I thank you because you are embodying that I was saying earlier, that the collective is a very real thing,
Yeah.
and that we are intentional, not just with what we're building, but we're intentional to look around and see what our sisters are building, and how we can help them. And Mystical Sisterhood is just a perfect example of that. So
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
thank
you.
you.
I concur with you when you talked about your client and, when she was just multitasking and bringing her ideas to
Hmm.
life and being a mom at the same time. And I always say the give and the receive that I give here is just so exponential. And anytime you're on the right track, if when you step off of what you just completed, like even this interview today, is that it just feels so good.
It
And
does, yes,
that's
right.
what just keeps me going. And sometimes people will suggest like, "Oh, you could take a little break or you could do," and I'm like, "You know what? There's no shortage of amazing work being
Hmm.
done, like, and I know this is my path." and it brings me alive. So I'm just so grateful for it.
So listen, you know you're onto something when you don't need a break from it. When it's
That's
like
true.
I
Yeah.
can work
Yeah.
because I'm getting paid to do something that brings me joy. My God, talk about everything aligning perfectly
Yeah.
when you don't need a break from what you do for a living. I think that's a blessing that we should not take lightly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, thank you for being with us today. I
Thank you for
will
having me,
put
Marie.
all the ways to reach you in the show notes. They'll find that. But thank you for being here to the listeners. I appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit MaureenSpielman.com or MysticalSisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.